Is Israel regularly in the habit of blackmailing
Yeah,
and
I think,
bribing?
look, I'm glad you asked that question. Obviously, judges are susceptible to political pressure. That's normal. We all know that. You have to live in a very, uh,
Gotta live under a rock.
you have to live under a rock not to recognize that. And we all know that judges are susceptible to pressures, and they're also susceptible to uh, uh, enticements. If you find the wrong ruling, certain doors are going to. If you make the wrong decision, certain doors are going to be closed to you. You know, Donald Trump, he's just straight out about it. You know, he's now saying that Egypt and Jordan have to take the people from Gaza. And he said yesterday, he said, we give them a lot of money. They're going to do what we say. Very simple. And he's very, he's probably right.
Yeah.
You know? So I'm not going to rule out those things. So when you ask me the question, is Israel in a habit? It's part of a bigger picture. I don't believe, I could be wrong, and I don't want to dispute it. I don't want anyone to take my word as written in stone. I don't think that's a usual practice among all countries. Practice the black arts. We know that. They have spies, they have agents, they resort to bribes, they resort to blackmail. No dispute about it. And I don't want in any way to be misconstrued like only Israel. But I do believe Israel has made a large use, let's call it extracurricular use, of its intelligence agencies. For those of you who, some of you listeners will and some won't remember, after Operation Cast Lead in 2008-9, it created a huge stir when Israel carried out its first massive assault on Gaza.
Mowing the lawn.
Yes. These high-tech killing sprees. The United Nations Human Rights Council commissioned a person named Richard Goldstone from South Africa to investigate what Israel had done in Gaza. Goldstone was Jewish. He was a self-avowed Zionist. I'm not using the word as an epithet or as approval. I'm just saying he called himself a Zionist. He served in the as a representative among Israeli institutions like the Hebrew University. He had a place there. His daughter had done Aliyah. She lived in Israel. And he agreed to be in the Commission of Inquiry. And he wrote this 650, I think paragraph, I can't remember now, a huge report condemning what Israel did in Gaza. He came under ferocious attack by the American Jewish community. Alan Dershowitz compared him to Dr. Mengele in Auschwitz. Yeah, it was way over the top. But he wasn't the only one. I mean, it was a concerted, ferocious attack. He weathered the storm, but then on April 1st, I emphasize April 1st because in the United States that's April Fool's Day, where people perform pranks. On April 1st, in the Washington Post, there's an op-ed by Richard Goldstone. He retracted the report. He retracted. And he claimed it was based on new factual findings, but it wasn't true. There were no new factual findings. It's just not true. I go through the record very carefully in my book, Gaza, an Inquest into Its Martyrdom. And the assumption was, the quiet assumption was, those black arts they found dirt on him or one of his family members. I did not believe it was him. He was a very respected judge, and doesn't mean that we don't all have skeletons in our closet. We do. He would have been careful, just because of his position. Not everybody in positions of power, recognize. It was Elliot Spitzer, who was the state controller, I think, very smart guy, and he ended up being brought down because he was having sexual relations with not just high-class cool girls, but people who had associations with the mob. He may have been the state attorney general. And it was like, so stupid. You left yourself so open to blackmail. Dumb, 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 dumb. And his political career collapsed after that. But I thought Goldstone probably had clean hands. But I figured, you have a daughter. Maybe she had an affair. Maybe she had a child out of wedlock. And then the threats come from the Israeli intelligence agencies. And then it's, Daddy, please, please do what they say, do it. And so when it came out on April 1st, the initial reaction was, it's a prank. I couldn't believe it. The head of the South African delegation to the ICJ is a person named John Dugard, who's a very highly regarded international lawyer. I have had correspondence with him. I say we could call each other acquaintances. When he comes to New York with his wife, we meet. And I remember I contacted him because the Goldstone report was like the ICJ plausible genocide finding. It was a landmark. These are a victory at a very high place. Okay? And then I told you when Joan Donahue said in April, we didn't find that, how angry I was. And when I read Goldstone retracted the report, I was so angry. And I wrote to Dugard and I said, something died in me today. And Dugard wrote back, same with me. Something died in me today. And then there are a whole series of other cases. There is the former chief prosecutor of the ICC, the International Criminal Court, Fatou Bensouda. And it was clear from the record, I wrote a whole book on it called I Accuse, that Bensouda was working for the Israelis, probably blackmailed by Israel. And there are other instances. So, I don't claim that Israel has a monopoly on this particular black art, but this use of blackmail, I think Israel is maybe in a category all its own, especially its effectiveness. I mean, look who we're talking about. The current president of the International Court of Justice, the former chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. These are high offices. And I do believe this. In the case of Joan Donahue, I don't think it was blackmail. It was simply careerism. Because she presided, she was the president of the ICJ when they found Israel plausibly committing genocide. Now that closes a lot of doors. It closes a lot of doors when she steps down as president because her term is over. And she had to open up those doors. And the way to open up those doors, you go on BBC Hard Talk and said, we never found that they were guilty of genocide. And that opens the door. I think it was pure careerism in her case. In the case of the whole rape claim about, October 7th, Hamas had weaponized rape as a weapon of war, used rape as a weapon of war. And that claim was first validated by Pramila Patten, and she was an appointee of the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. In her case, I think she was just stupid.